and welcome to my channel on GST updates, the Text Bytes. Friends, today we will discuss a very important judgment which has been held by the Supreme Court of India in the matter of Canaan Enterprises. Now, friends, in the past we have seen that the government authorities are very eager to block the electronic credit ledger of the SSE. Simply, in simple words, the meaning of the words blocking of ECL, the electronic credit ledger, implies that the person, whenever they are paying the output liabilities, are not eligible or not allowed to use the ITC which is available in the ECL, the electronic credit ledger. The person, if the credit is blocked in the ECL, that assessee has to mandatorily pay all the liabilities in cash. So putting another burden or tax flow issue, the cash flow issues against that assessee. Now, in this case, what has happened that the field officer visited the person, the petitioner, Canaan Enterprises, and found it to be non-existent at the place of registration, the place which has been registered in the GST registration certificate. Now, based on the report by the field formation, the Commissioner of GST blocked the ECL by passing a suitable order. Now the petitioner approaches the High Court, wherein they petitioned before the High Court that the Commissioner has violated the principle of natural justice, meaning thereby the Commissioner has not given them a hearing, or the petitioner has not been heard by the Commissioner before freezing or before blocking the ITC, the ECL, in the electronic credit ledger. Now, friends, before proceeding what has been held by the High Court and subsequently upheld by the Supreme Court, the High Court judgment, we first see the Rule 86A governing the provisions in relation to the blocking of ECL. Now, if we see the Section 86A1, the Sub-Rule 1, has inbuilt provision of safeguarding the interest of the assessee, wherein it has been provided that the person blocking the ECL should not be below the rank of Assistant Commissioner. If I remove my photograph from this screen, it is mentioned that not below the rank of Assistant Commissioner. But that Assistant Commissioner should also be authorized by the Commissioner to do such an ECL. Now, friends, the another question that arises is in which circumstances the ECL can be blocked. There are 2 or 3 circumstances which have been prescribed under the rule, as you can see from the screen, that the ECL can be blocked if the ITC has been availed by the registered person who has been found non-existent or not conducting the business from any place or registry for which the registration has been obtained, or the ITC has been availed without receipt of goods or services. This is from the supplier side. Similarly, if we come to the point number B, it mentions that the credit of input tax has been availed on the strength of tax invoices or other document, the tax on which has not been paid to the government by the supplier. If the supplier has not paid the taxes, then also the ECL of the recipient can be blocked. Similarly, if we see the another scenario in which the ECL can be blocked is the buyer, the person who has claimed the ITC itself is not found at the place from which or from where the registration has been obtained by the GST authorities. The last point is that the person or the claimant of the ITC, the recipient, is not in possession of the tax invoices. So far so good. Now, friends, I would also draw your attention towards Sub-Rule 2, which says that the Commissioner or the officer authorized by him, upon being satisfied that a condition for disallowing the credit has been met or is not required to be freezed, then can allow a debit in the ECL. And such a freeze cannot exceed 1 year from the date of such a blocking of the ECL. Now, friends, the Sub-Rule 1 is very important, wherein it has been mentioned that the Commissioner or the Assistant Commissioner must have the reason to believe. These 3 words, reason to believe, if you see the cursor on the screen, reason to believe, the Commissioner or the Assistant Commissioner has to formulate the reason to believe that the circumstances are there to block the credit. Now, what the petitioner argued before the High Court is that he argued into the 2 aspects. Number 1, that the Commissioner or the GST authorities have not met the mandatory conditions of giving the natural justice, the principle of natural justice, which simply means that appropriate opportunity should be given to a to a petitioner or to a assessee before taking any action which would put that petitioner or that taxpayer under a duress. No doubt that in the case of blocking of ECL, there is a duress to that customer, to that assessee, insofar as that assessee is not entitled or is not allowed to use the credit which otherwise he is eligible to utilize. The court held that if we see Rule 86A, what has been put forth by the departmental authorities or the government pleader, he mentions that Rule 86A is conspicuous or is characterized by the absence of giving any opportunity of being heard to the petitioner or to the taxpayer before blockage of the credit. Now, we have seen Rule 86A, I have just shown you or you're looking at the screen, that it nowhere talks about giving a pre-decisional hearing to the assessee, to the taxpayer, before blocking the ECL. What this 86A, Rule 86A says, that the commissioner should formulate reasons to believe for blocking such a credit. The government pleader argued that since there is no such requirement, so whatever action that commissioner has taken is valid, and the blockage of the ECL was perfectly valid. Now the single bench, when heard this case before the KN Enterprises, they agreed with the government pleader and held that since 86A doesn't have any requirement of giving a pre-decisional hearing, the blockage of credit suo motu by a commissioner or the person authorized by him is perfectly valid. When the matter reached to the divisional bench, they disagreed with the findings or the decision of the single bench and mentioned that the principle of natural justice are inbuilt in such kind of scenarios wherein the action of a government authority is put a petitioner or the taxpayer into duress and need not be specifically mentioned on the face of that statutory provision. The High Court relied on various Supreme Court judgments and held that the principle of natural justice can be read into Rules 86A even if it is not available apparently in Rule 86A. So, on the basis of that, the High Court held that the Commissioner clearly erred when it has or he has freezed the ECL without giving any pre-decisional hearing to the assessee. Now, the department authorities or the government was not satisfied with the judgment of the High Court, and they approached the Supreme Court for against the judgment given by the High Court. The Supreme Court didn't entertain the appeal and upheld the decision given by the High Court, clearly providing or clearly upholding the judgment given by the High Court that the pre-decisional hearing in the matter of blocking of ECL is mandatory. So friends, this is a very important judgment, and we have to, which will come